Looking to enhance the appeal and performance of your gym with state-of-the-art equipment? Look no further than the Gym Administrator. Founded by Sal Corrente, professional wrestling manager, promoter, and author of the great book Bruno Sammartino, the autobiography of wrestling's living legend, available on Amazon.com, the Gym Administrator will spot you on that final rep and assist you every step of the way from purchase through installation. Whether it be strength training, cardiovascular training, or performance enhancement, the Gym Administrator works with a wide array of leading vendors and suppliers carefully selected to meet the diverse needs of your clientele. Service the way you remember it. Contact us at 914-494-1066 or visit our website at thegymadministrator.com, as well as all social media platforms. The Gym Administrator. All your fitness needs under one roof. Scan the barcode at the bottom of the screen to get started today.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's number one pro wrestling broadcast. Monte The Pharaoh, only seen here out of Tin Mirror Studios in Kings Park, Long Island. I got that down now, Jimmy, right? Here's my partner, the star of the show, Jimmy Pharaoh. Jimmy, how are you, bud?
What up? Good. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Big night.
Let's do it.
Tonight we've got the original gangster. Seriously, though, dude, on a serious note, the podfather of wrestling podcast. He, along with his partner Kevin Castle, have one hell of a show. Very popular, and the amazing thing, considering Jimmy, these guys have such an audience, and they do so well with literally no assistance in their distribution.
That's starting to sound familiar to me, Mike.
But I got to tell you, it's
kind
of amazing.
Respect.
You know, think about that. These are two guys from whatever that put together this show. I mean, we'll go into the history of Tony and Kevin Castle and all that. But I'm always amazed on how well, like, certain people like this, you know, it's just in them to hit this out, right?
Right. Well, you know what? We've talked. Look, this is much more to your credit. We've talked about a lot of podcasts since we started doing our show. Right. We've discussed many of them, but this one I'm really excited about because this is exactly what you said. This is somebody who built it. Fans, right? They're not in the business, right? They're two guys, right? And they get themselves in, and they built what they built. They have a great show. They have great chemistry, obviously. And how long have they been doing this?
Long time.
Mad respect. You better give respect, you know, because that's what we aspire to do. And we've been doing ourselves for a long time now. It's not an easy road.
Dude,
someone's got to do it.
You know better than anybody, right? I don't really like any of these guys out there, to be truthful, right? There's a lot of – most of them I really just can't even stand. I like to punch them all in the fucking face. But these guys I dig, right? So, again, for them for Tony to accept the invitation to come on the show – is a big deal. So I'm really looking forward to it. And not only that, not to put a lot of pressure on you and on Don Tony, we're up against the presidential debate tonight. So we better hit a fucking home run tonight, all right? But before we introduce Tony, I want to hit you with some news. Driver arrested after giving a state trooper the middle finger settles for $175,000. A $175,000 settlement has been reached in a lawsuit in Vermont where a man said he was arrested after giving the officer the middle finger. Jimmy, what do you think of that?
So he got $175,000 for giving a cop the middle finger?
Well, he got arrested.
But that's it. That's all he did.
He said it was an infringement of his right to freedom of speech.
Wow. I wonder what would happen if I tried that going down to Lagoon Mart right now.
They'd find you in a fucking ditch.
Yeah, they would.
That's our luck, right? We ain't getting 175 grand. You're dead.
170. How the hell did this happen? I mean, if I'm that precinct, I'm like, wow, we might as well close. I mean, talk about a morale boost notch. What is that?
Dude.
That's all. Well, what do you think should have happened to the guy? Ditch? Gator?
I honestly, listen, you know how I feel about the state of America right now, but I got to be honest. There's people that are lucky and there's people that are not lucky. And like I said, this guy's lucky, hit the lottery. He, gave a guy a finger, got arrested, found a good lawyer and knocked it out. Us, we can't even get our fucking money from goddamn Intuitive who owes us $150,000. We're going to start calling those fucking guys out soon too, man.
I think you just did.
No, it's going to get bad now. I've had it. I want my fucking money. Tony has allowed to curse. I don't curse. I don't usually curse this much. But you know what? I'm going to call this guy out. I'm going to show every shitty movie he ever made. I'm going to rip that fucking channel apart. I want my money, bro.
Yeah, bro. We have 351 more bros to go before we tie Vince Russo's amount of bros for the WCW Who Killed WCW documentary.
Let's bring in the Podfather. Don Tony, thank you for joining Long Island's #1 pro wrestler broadcast. How are you?
How you doing tonight, guys?
Hey,
how you doing?
Walks right into this conversation. How you doing, Don?
Not bad. Doing pretty good tonight. I heard that there's a little bit of a presidential debate going on as we speak. And honestly, I would prefer 10 times over being here than checking out two almost 80-year-old guys basically. I don't know what the hell's going on with our country, man.
Well, Jimmy was saying that. He was talking to me on the phone today, and he said, we grew up with Ronald Reagan, and today's youth have to grow up with this nonsense.
Yeah, it's just terrible. Since we always talk about wrestling, we always get into the IWC and, just the wrestling community and the disrespect and just a lot of stuff. But, I think a lot of people realize that it's in every aspect of our culture. It's sports, it's entertainment, it's politics, it's walking down the street. It's just what society is today. It just so happens with pro wrestling that we're a little bit more outspoken, but man, the level of coddling that goes on these days. You were just talking about somebody who just cursed out a cop and got $175,000, man. It's like, something tells me if I would have gave the cop the middle finger and got arrested, they probably would have been like, hey, suck it up.
That's right.
I wouldn't have got nothing. So
let me ask you this.
They would have set my bail $175,000.
Well, better yet, on your show, you speak about your father often. If your father would have found out that you gave a cop the finger, what would he have done to you?
Honestly, my father would probably get a good laugh out of it. He probably would get a good laugh out of it. There's a true story. I mean, it's passed beyond the, I guess the time that he can't get in trouble for it. But back in 1968, before I was even born, my father was dating my mom. And there was a cop that was hitting on her. And they used to live in Ridgewood, Brooklyn, off of Knickerbocker Avenue. And long story short, my father confronted the cop and said, look, she doesn't want nothing to do with you. And it was like that bad scene in Goodfellas when Ray Liotta took the gun and started bashing. My father didn't use a gun, but my father beat the shit out of this cop. And, he told us this story later on. We weren't even born yet, but at that time, they just sucked it up and moved on. And he never got in trouble for it. So my father probably would have been like, that's all you did? Middle finger? What the fuck is that? So.
Well, that went the wrong way, Jimmy. You know what? You disappointed me. You should have took that cop out, Tony. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Came pretty close anyway.
I'm afraid to have any confrontations with anybody this day and age, whether it's a cop, whether anybody. Because...
Don, I'm thinking right now, I think you're looking at me wrong. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? It's just like at this point, anything can be a violation of somebody else's space, I guess, right?
I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was breaking up.
Yeah.
How about
now? Say something.
Something.
No, I heard everything. I was just. Yeah.
Look at you. Look at
I heard everything.
Yeah, I can't believe you fell for
that. I used to do that with Kevin. We would joke around, and when the conversation would get really bad, I'd be like, I can't hear you. I think we're losing connection here, and you know.
Listen, before we get going, we lost the iconic Samoan Sika. What were your thoughts on that whole situation? You got any memories of Sika?
Well, I'll say this. You know, I was watching Sal Corrente on earlier, and I'm with you. You know, my memory that always sticks in my brain was when Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas took on them and had the wooden chair. I think it was over Offa's head, because I remember he bashed him over the head, and Offa just stood there like, you know, like, what the fuck's going on? And then he went down. I'll be honest with you, without trying to sound terrible, I honestly thought if one of them was going to go first, there was a lot of concern for Offa. You know, they just closed his school, used to be on the Northeast, and then it went to Florida. Sika, you know, growing up, I mean, my God, one of the greatest tag teams from my childhood. My greatest personal memory of Sika was, and a lot of people actually that tune into my hotline over the years, because when I have a decent story, I tell it 80,000 times because my life is kind of boring. But I used to go to Ridgewood Grove Arena, and my grandmother used to take me. And back in May of 1983, I broke my arm riding a bike. And one thing that my grandmother did for me, because my uncle used to work at the Ridgewood Grove Arena, was she got us tickets for a WWF show at the arena. And the main event was Ivan Koloff and Bob Backlund. And Bob Backlund signed my cast. And after the show was over, I took pictures with everybody. And then my Uncle Mikey talked, I don't remember which wrestler it was. It might have even been Sal Belomo. And he's like, you know, let's go get something to eat. And they all said, yeah, let's go get something to eat. And all I remember inside the restaurant was Bob Backlund, Salvatore Belomo, my uncle, my grandmother, me, 3 or 4 other people, and Sika. Sika was on the show also. And, you know, but some people stood for a little while. It was right around Knickerbocker Avenue under the L. There was a little restaurant. I mean, I'm a preteen pretty much. You know, I'm what, 13 years old, 14 years old. So, you know, you're talking 40 years ago plus. But that was just surreal. And at the same time, not being a smart wrestling fan, it was strange to see the good guys and the bad guys all together, you know, having a little bit of a dinner and eating and drinking and, you know, people hugging each other. And, you know, one thing that I always took from that was the respect value. Like that carried over. You don't see it as much these days, but that lack of respect now, but back in the day, it just seemed like people really went out of their way to, even to a point sometimes that you would be like, you know, that's a little bit much, you know, like they would, it almost sounded fake how much respect they showed each other. But that was something that always stuck with me.
Very cool. Listen, before we get started, I wanted to ask you personally, how proud are you of what you've accomplished in the time doing this podcast? I mean, let's call it like it is. You are one of the highest level podcasts for wrestling out there, without any backing. You've had multiple partners, but the one thing that's always stayed was you, right? The pillar, we'll call it. I hate to use that word since AEW uses it, kind of ruins that word. But how proud are you, man? When you look at this, how proud are you of yourself?
You know, I honestly, for many years, I just said to myself, wow, what a boring fucking 25 years. You know, like it just, you know what it is? I've been a lifelong wrestling fan. My grandmother introduced me to wrestling in 1979. And when my mother found out, because my grandmother used to babysit us, me and my brother. And when my mom found out that my grandmother was letting me watch wrestling at midnight on Channel 9 Saturday nights, my mother yelled. And when she yelled at me and yelled at my grandmother for letting us watch that, being so young, I knew that I was watching something good. I was like, you try to take it away from me. I want it more. But, you know, being a wrestling fan my whole life, you know, meant a lot. I had a very serious car accident in 1996 that almost killed me. And at that time, I probably had the same aspirations of becoming a wrestler like Mass Transit, God rest his soul, even though he was a disaster. Like, I always wanted to wrestle. And me and my friends would backyard, and, you know, I was very serious about joining a wrestling school. But in 96, I got into an accident, almost killed me. And I was in a wheelchair for 9 months doing nothing. And one thing that just kept my sanity and kept my, you know, spirits up was wrestling. And I always called the wrestling hotlines. Dominic Valente, I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's still around to this day doing it. Coach Kirk, even ML Curl, even though he turned out to be a pedophile. I always tune into wrestling hotlines, and, you know, just not doing much in 1997 and becoming hooked on ECW for those couple of years leading into it. You know, just from calling hotlines and interacting with the hotlines, you know, I noticed that the hotline host would always shout me out and always mention in detail what I would talk about. And other people would call in and, you know, retort what I was saying. And I don't remember who it was, but somebody said, you know, you should start your own hotline. Just talk about wrestling. And I started it in 1997, and it was inspired by Tony Lewis that did a strictly ECW hotline. And within a year, it was the most listened to wrestling hotline, you know, as far as I know. Blackjack Brown, God rest his soul, who used to do the 900 numbers, you know, and clickbait everybody. He wanted me to get involved in the 900 numbers. You know, it just caught on. And, you know, in 2000, I get a voicemail on my hotline from Louis Dangerously from ECW. And he's like, look, you got a big following with your hotline. We would love for you to do a little bit of promotion with ECW, pushing tickets and doing this and that and this. So we started pushing tickets on ECW, and, you know, got to go to the shows, doing that. And then ECW closes down, my favorite promotion of all time. I always keep that sign up there to pay homage to them. And then XPW is coming to the Northeast, who was ECW's biggest rival, you know, I guess, and hater. And the next thing I know, you know, somebody involved with XPW gets in touch with me, and Shane Douglas gets in touch with me and is like, yeah, we want you to do our bus trips. So we would do bus trips through my hotline, and we would sell 3-4 Big Coach USA buses from New York to Philly for the XPW shows. And a lot of people, they know this, but many people don't, that when you watch the retro episodes of XPW when they were in Philly, half of the crowd were my bus trips. And, you know, just from there, you realize, wow, this is 5 years gone by, 10 years gone by. Frank Goodman, who used to be here in the Northeast, he now lives in Florida. He had USA Pro Wrestling. He got me involved with that. We plugged the shows through the hotline. And then because it got so successful with bus trips and everything, I started to become hated. And people used to really troll me online. And, you know, I think it was Low Life Louis Ramos that said to me, and he said, hey, why don't you be a character? And I'm like, nobody wants to see me do anything. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is indies. This is nothing serious. You know, just be a character, you know, do something. So I started doing, I didn't even know what to do. So I figured, let me do a reflection, because I live in Howard Beach. Members of John Gotti's family went to my wedding in 1999. That marriage was annulled in 6 months. And, you know, I did managing for a little while. And I did a Tony Cannoli gimmick where I would bring cannolis out. I give it to everybody at ringside, and then I would reveal that I put X-Lax in the cannolis. I would bring cannolis to the ring, and everybody would eat it. And then I would have the empty trays and give it to whoever I was managing as a weapon to use in a match. It was like kind of way to sneak weapons to the ring. And then just to fast forward to now, there was this guy, Slash, that was involved with XPW that ripped me off for thousands of dollars. And he ripped off, I didn't care about my money as much, but he ripped off my two little nephews. My nephews used to go to the XPW bus trips for free. And this guy knew that they would always be comped for everything because their father, my uncle, took his own life. And at the time, I think they were maybe 10 and 12 years old. And basically, this guy Slash pocketed all the XPW bus trip money for my last run, which was like $4,000 or $5,000. And then I found out that he actually took money from them also. So for a very long time, I was trying to hunt him down. And, Mass Maniac is still alive. People that know about it are still alive. They could vouch for this. Whenever Slash would show up at a wrestling event, somebody would call me up or call Frank up and say, hey, he's here. Bam Bam Bigelow, God rest his soul, who I became friendly with. He called me up and he's like, hey, he's here. So one time in a wrestling event in Long Island, this was, I think, 2005, 2006, he was at one of the shows that we were working. And I had the cannolis underneath the table because I would be the one collecting the money at the door. And Frank trusted me with that. And, somebody said, he's here. He's in the crowd. He's in the third row. And I didn't know what to do. I looked down. I saw cannolis. I took a whole bunch of cannolis. And I went up to him and he looked at me. He's like, holy shit. I can't believe it. How you doing? You look so good. I was like, fuck you. And I just uppercutted him with the cannolis. I went outside. I took his sunglasses because he used to wear sunglasses at night. I threw it on the floor. I stepped on it. I tried to be cool like the Godfather. Like I threw 220s on the floor. I go fucking get new glasses. I walked back into place and some snowflake walks up to me and he's like, was that necessary?
Wow.
I was like, that guy ripped off money from my nephews. Their father shot himself in the head. I was like, you're going to tell me? And he's like, yeah, but did you really need to do that? Like, you got your Gotti shirt on because that's what I used to wear. He says, what are you, a fucking Don? And I got a little man. I'm like, yeah, I'm a fucking Don. I'm Don fucking Tony. And the guy walked away and it stuck. So ever since then, I've been Don Tony. And, after all these years, for a little while, I thought to myself, all right, I'm married now. I'm getting older. I have some health issues. My parents are very, in their elder years. Maybe I should not do this anymore. And then I say to myself, yeah, but you've been doing the wrestling hotline since 1997. You're the longest running person. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to give up that moniker because I was like, yeah, I'm old. Kevin and I are old, but we still love wrestling. We still love talking about it. One thing that I think has allowed me to do this since 97 and allowed me to get involved with different things, I always tried to be authentic. Like what you see is what you get. If I did my hotline back in the 90s, I talked to people as if we were all friends at a barbecue or at a bar just talking about wrestling. I think these days people are doing it just for hits, for views, to try to get ad revenue, for clickbait. I don't think people understand how toxic YouTube is with all the bullshit that you read, bro. And I love Vince Russo, but, I say to all of them, I'm like, hey, God bless you if you could sucker people in that much for, to make them think that this is this and this is that. But I always wanted to be authentic. I always wanted to be that guy that, hey, we talk about wrestling, we have fun, and that's what it's all about. I mean, I'm not going to lie, over the years, I like doing my own thing. I like being the boss. I like being in charge. I do my own video. My hotline, I did the hotline. When we were podcasting in 2003 online and the audio was awful, we did it all ourselves. I don't like other people doing things for me because I always feel like, hey, if you want to do it right, you got to do it yourself. And if you screw up, it's your own fault for screwing up. But after all these years, I just still enjoy wrestling. And, unfortunately, you, me, few people out there. We're in that category now that, if you're not part of the in crowd, if you're not just going with the flow, if you're not doing things just to spark emotion or just go along with things and true to yourself is not what you believe, you're considered an outcast. God forbid, we get some stuff correct. God forbid we have a few people in wrestling that we became friends with over the years that tell you a few things, and because they didn't get the information, they just ignore you. That was one of the things, back in the mid 2000s, we had a few people that I was never wrestling news. I was not a reporter. I wasn't a journalist. But in the early 2000s, some people within wrestling would call my line and say, hey, check this, and that. We had a guy in TNA that we used to call Mr. Mystery, and he's the one that broke to us that Nash signed, Hall signed, that Hogan was coming in, a whole bunch of, we would bring it online, and we would go to other wrestling sites and it'd be like, hey, we got this scoop, and nobody would post it. And I realized, I'm like, if CBS don't like NBC, and NBC is the only one that shows up for a fire and a bunch of people die in a fire, is CBS not going to cover it because they don't like that NBC was the only one there? They got to cover the story anyway. And I learned early on, if you're not part of that crowd, like, unless you are willing to do the favors, and I mean that in a sexual way, or just mindgasms, they just will shun you out and, no sell you and act like you don't exist.
Jimmy and I speak about this a lot, right? So it's, kind of jumping ahead because I'm going to go back to something else, but we'll use LaGreca and Busted Open Radio, okay? I listen to LaGreca. I've had discussions with LaGreca, so has Jimmy. I've noticed many times where I've listened to your show when you were doing it by yourself on a Monday morning. I'd listen at work, some early, at work. You would say stuff. Literally the following, like that morning show at 9 a.m., he would repeat your words. Not even like, look, it's wrestling, right? So you're going to come within the same realm of each other, but he would use your words. My own partner here has many times been, and it drives me crazy, right? Because it's like, they're bigger. They're the ones that are going to do it. And how do you deal with that?
Well, there's a podcast out there who I really, really enjoy. I don't want to say who it is, but a bunch of people brought to my attention that for the last couple of weeks, well, maybe even a month or two, I've been using this analogy with AEW. And I said, Tony Khan, he brought in Okada, he brought in Mercedes Moné, he brought in Jay White, he brought in Will Ospreay. I said, and they can't even draw 700,000 viewers. I said, that's like someone who has a bunch of exotic cars in their driveway, and because they don't know how to drive stick, they just got a bunch of beautiful cars in the driveway just sitting there, and basically soon enough they just get a little bit rusty, and unfortunately they're just for show. And literally word for word, I check out, a few people tell me I check out this podcast, like, Tony's just like a guy that has, he signed Ospreay, signed White, and it's like he's got these exotic cars that sit in the driveway. And I'm like, this is how I look at it. Kev and I had the opportunity to do Sirius Satellite many years before Busted Open ever did. The only reason why we didn't do it was because, one, we weren't going to get paid much at all in the beginning. Number two, I didn't want to go at 2:00 in the morning, to go to a studio, especially if I'm not getting paid for it when I have my insurance things that I do. And then plus Kev doesn't drive and he doesn't live right near me. So it was a kind of a hassle for him also. We were going to do FM radio a long time ago, but, we were just a little bit too vulgar, and recreating that wouldn't have worked. I look at it like this. Right now, I get it. You see what people are doing in the podcasting world that gets them the tens of thousands of views. Sooner or later, people are going to get tired of that. Because here's the thing. I think Dave LaGreca is very, very smart, just like Mark Henry and Bully Ray and everybody else on there, because they post ridiculously stupid arguments sometimes that anybody in their right mind having a wrestling discussion would say, Saudi Arabia don't give a fuck about Jey Uso versus Tama Tonga in the King of the Ring main event. You know, like with all due respect to Tama Tonga, he had just come in like, you're not going to put him King of the Ring. It's going to be Gunther versus Randy Orton. And they're putting this argument out there like Tama Tonga, he should be King of the Ring. And I'm like, there's no way that you think that inside, but I get it. You know, they understand that the wrestling community
you're
of today.
You're giving them too much credit. They got people working for him. He doesn't have a fucking original thought in his mind. And I'm
really?
being serious here. Okay, you don't have the advantage of people working for you, posting your videos, cutting it exactly right, you know, whatever. Listen, give the guy the credit of the world. He turned wrestling into a show. Disappointing you and Kev didn't go on. Think that was a mistake.
Yeah,
sorry to say. But to me, at some point, when do you get mad? When do you get upset? Because, again, Jimmy and I always speak. We're like, you know what? Jimmy, speak to this. We're like, we'll be dead, and then be old. He'll call me one day from Florida. We're 70 years old. He'd be like, hey, man, people are starting to really discover us now. Right, Jimmy?
Right.
I say it like this. They're very smart because they realize that their audience are gullible about and want to be emotional, like the Cody Rhodes stuff.
Yeah, well, it just seems to be the way it works.
Yeah, that's the plan. They know who butters their bread, and they want to. And listen, this is not criticism against the wrestling guys there, but as far as Dave LaGreca goes, like I said, doing this. We want Cody thing in New York City where literally a block away there's these protests about Palestine and Israel and all this stuff. I'm like, you know, it's that audience is a niche audience as far as being that gullible. But you got to also understand, and I'm not defending them. I'm just saying
Don, I got to ask you, is this Crash Radio? You know how Russo had his Crash TV? Is this just Crash?
No, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. The wrestlers.
It's all well thought out, but isn't the end result the same freaking thing? You're throwing shit on the wall.
No, because Cody comes on there, Undertaker comes on there, a lot of people come on there, and they know that underneath the table, they're getting pedicures, they're getting foot massages, that then they don't have to worry about getting, you know, a couple of questions that might, you know, everybody's thinking. But you know they wouldn't dare say. That's why Tony Khan doesn't go on there anymore.
So let me call you out on this then. What is the final fate for the truth teller who wants to do a show? Because you're obviously saying there's us and them. What is the fate for shows like us then, long term?
Sooner or later, people get tired of the bullshit.
Thank you.
I think people are getting tired about this recreation of who killed WCW. I think after 4 weeks, people realized with all. I hate to say it like this, but most people realize they got jerked off for 4 weeks. They don't understand that The Rock is an entertainer. They think that's because Cody wears a suit that he doesn't, you know, like blur the lines because he's a sports entertainer. I think for a lot of these shows out there, they may be popular for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but if they're not authentic, if they're not meaning what they say and say what they mean from here, after a while, their fakeness comes out. I think what's going on with AEW is a great example. I see people that for 4 years built that fire with AEW that whenever they would post about stuff that was mediocre, they would put capital words and all these beautiful emojis. And if you even dared to challenge it, what the fuck? What are you, fucking WWE dick sucker? What the fuck is wrong? What are you, stupid? This, and then you're like, man, I don't even want to talk wrestling with you people. And now because AEW's gotten so bad because that comfort zone, that foundation was built on silly putty, now it's staring at them in the face. And now all of a sudden, the people who started the fire are trying to tell us how to put it out. You know, it's just, I think after a while, people realize, man, I'm wasting too much time on people who are just using me for ad revenue. And I think that's what it comes down to. I think people, you look at the titles of the thumbnails, Shane McMahon to buy buy AEW, huh? Like, what? Like, oh, MJF making $15 million. Coach said that in his podcast just saying, oh, he probably broke the bank. Yeah, maybe he made even $15 million. It wasn't based on news, and people just run with it. I think after a while, people are going to realize, hey, I'm just being used to get a little bit of ad revenue. And I think that's when the tides turn. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still, at least, got numbers. My biggest mistake was breaking off with Kev about 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, Tony, I want to cut you off there because we're going to get into that, okay? Because that's an important part of your story, okay? Utmost respect for Kevin Castle. I think you two work very well together.
He's incredible. A really good guy.
And I wrote you privately, and when you guys got back together, I'm like, thank God you guys, whatever. But we'll talk about that later. But here's So you spoke about interviews, right? And you spoke about asking the tough questions. So, again, I know you know how much I love your show, but I did have a problem with your Misha Montana interview. I was disappointed. Now, again, to be fair, you were team Misha and Matt Riddle. At the time, we were team Daniela Petro. At the time, and I'm not gonna put my partner in that, so I'll say I was team Daniela Petro. Number one,
God help me, Don Tony, help me.
Why didn't you ask Misha the hard questions? Because I felt like you threw her softballs that entire interview. And two, on a personal basis, how do you feel comfortable about, again, I know nothing about Matt Riddle, really, only what Daniela Petro told me, which ended up being something totally different, okay? So at this point, I'll start this before you answer this question. I apologize.
No apologies.
No, not to you. To Misha Montana and Matt Riddle, because I believed in something that didn't turn out to be quite exactly that. But it still doesn't dissolve you of throwing softballs at Misha Montana, because she got involved with a man that has been accused of some very bad stuff.
Yeah. Here's the truth, and I have to bring up something else to make my point.
You were getting a foot massage under the table.
No, nothing like that. Believe me, I tell you, I felt.
Making sure.
Listen,
just making sure.
My wife was totally against it. My wife was, because when I was preparing for the show, every time I would Google her, I'm looking for XPW stuff, and every time I'm Googling her, my wife was like, "Yeah," she's like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And it's all porn stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Here's the thing. I've been doing this since '97. And I did a couple of interviews when I was pushing XPW. Outside of that, the only interviews that I had ever done, was Conan, when me and Georgianne did the drive to raise money so he could get his transplant. Cool. Trina Michaels, who was an adult film star that was trying to get in TNA at the time, just called in as a regular caller to one of our episodes, and we were just chatting about wrestling. But I don't do interviews. I don't ever do interviews. Never. So with the stuff with Misha Montana, I felt bad because she's got a special needs kid, because she had some serious health issues. And, I had talked to her quite a bit behind the scenes, and I saw, no pun intended, a lot of people ganging up on her. And, I said, why don't you,
no pun intended.
No pun intended.
I'm sorry. You left the door just a little bit open there. What is that?
Yeah, it's a salami. It's my salami.
This is a pretty big salami.
I think I banged myself in the mouth with it too. No, the thing is, I had talked to her a lot about it. And I said, why don't you come on? We'll talk about XPW, we'll talk about other stuff. Then I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, Matt Riddle's got to be a topic of conversation, because he obviously was suspended for the wellness program. There was rumors that he had done, blow. And the thing was that he was still part of WWE. And, there was also a lot of counseling that went on, because he had a lot of, emotional issues also. So I had said to him, like, look, if I don't bring up the wellness suspension, if I don't bring up this, that's the first thing people are going to ask me, like, how do you not bring that up? And the thing was that, you know, because out of respect for him, if that even makes sense, like, I felt that if he didn't make it public yet, I shouldn't be the one to do so. And I was like, how do I bring her on without putting that out there? Because it is a very personal thing. It's still wrong. I mean, you know, whatever happened is wrong. And I said, even joking around, I said, look, if that anything like that comes out, it should be with Ariel Helwani, not with Don Tony. So when I brought her on, I did not prepare for the show. I had no notes. I had a couple of screenshots of her, and that's the thing with even with Kevin and I, going back even to the 90s with the hotlines. I don't prepare that much. I figure, you know, if I am really talking about what I want to talk about, it's like I don't need to rehearse. So when I brought her on, the first thing that came to mind was Matt Riddle. I'm like, all right, how do I deal with this? And I just said in passing, I'm like, look, guys, I'm going to tell you all right up front. You know, if you're here to find out the dirt about Matt Riddle, you're not going to get it here. And after we did the show, Matt, before I even put online, one of the promises was that Matt Riddle was going to watch this show in its entirety and then give me the okay to put it up. And he watched it and he said he loved it, and I put it up. In fact, he wants to come on with me, and I haven't done it yet because, you know, it's like I'm not an interview guy. Like I don't want to bring someone on and then kind of be like a Dave LaGreca, because nothing against Dave LaGreca personally, but I don't want to be him. I don't want to be that guy that, you know, just says the questions that makes you feel all nice and cuddly and giddy. And, you know, and then you kind of like throw a little dirt out there, you know, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to wear pink robes. I don't want to, you know, act like, you know, I just want to be myself. And
right.
Am I glad I had her on? Yeah, because I felt bad that how this was being portrayed, because I knew there was more to it, but I probably wasn't the right person to do it because I'm not an interviewer. So I definitely know that, you know, people were disappointed, and rightfully so.
You know, Mike, he's definitely one of us in that us and them thing, because that's about as honest as you can get right there.
No, it's absolutely an honest answer. But, you know, unfortunately, fortunately, when you put yourself out here, you're open to ridicule by the people that watch you. But you have to stand for something, right? So I believe when, you know, Jimmy, how we feel, if you interview someone, you should ask questions that mean something. And I'm not saying Tony didn't. All I'm saying is I understand where he's coming from on this. Right. Here's a harder question for you, Tony, all right?
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry if I keep touching my teeth. I legitimately,
it's all good.
This is ceramic. I actually bashed myself in the tooth, and this is a cap. So I'm kind of worried. Like, I don't want to break my tooth on the show. So
this is going to be a really tough question, Tony. So
yeah, okay, yeah.
Obviously, Riddle and Misha Montana had a child. Matt Riddle seems to have some sort of an issue. Don't know exactly. And as you said, when you look up Misha Montana, it's probably not the best stuff, right? Unless you have your stuff on your Google on safety, where those. By the way, that's a lesson for you. Put it on safety, you won't get all those porn shots, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel about two people who are so reckless? And I'm sorry, I'm going to say it, reckless with their lives, bringing yet another child onto this planet.
This is a spur of the moment answer, because I obviously wasn't expecting this question, but I'll give you the best answer I can. And the answer might be a little bizarre, but I think everybody will understand what I'm saying. When I did work for XPW in the Northeast, Veronica Kane was an adult film star. She worked there. Lizzie Borden, who's the wife of Rob Black, worked there. They were all in the adult film world. And even before their first event in Philly, Hostile Takeover, the guy that befriended me, and I've told this story before they even had the first event, he's like, hey, you want to get a little crash course on some of the people that work there? I'm like, yeah. He gives me a box. I didn't even look at it. I take it home, I open it up, and it's all these porn films with all these women. And I'm looking at them like, you know, and this is not just standard guy on girl, girl on girl. This is like really extreme. So anyway, my point is, one of the first events that they had there, it was Lizzie Borden's birthday. And I remember clearly, we went to Carvel in Philly or some bakery to get a birthday cake for her. And everybody surprised her in the ECW arena with the cake, behind the scenes, day before an event. And she was wearing sweatpants and crying and just being really cool. And then that night, everybody was in my hotel room and they're sitting there just casual, like talking, watching movies, watching this, doing this. And I'm looking across the room and I'm like, man, this girl got banged by 8 people and she's like one of the most down-to-earth people. Like you would like it humanized. Not saying that there's anything wrong with the adult film world, but my point is that when I saw them out of their element, it really showed me that, wow, I could never date someone who is an adult film star because I am not sharing, my wife with someone else, even if it's a job. But I saw that, at the end of the day, they have the capability and the personality and the brains that they can put that off. And now this is, real life. And I kind of felt that same way with Misha Montana. Like I talked to her for hours and hours and hours, multiple times before we even thought about doing an interview. And because the first time we even interacted, when I first heard about the situation, and I know I had said something on one of my shows, she thanked me and we started talking. And the more I talked to her, I was like, she's just like a down-to-earth person, just like anybody else. Outside of the adult film industry, you would have never thought that that's what she did. So, I look at it like this. And this is nothing against her. This is nothing against Riddle. It's nothing against Pietro or the others. That's a life that I will never understand. That is a society, a culture that, yous may never understand. And a lot of people, like, obviously for them, it's not an issue to have, their partner, commingling with others in the case of Misha or even Matt Riddle. So, their kid was brought in, as far as I know, not by accident, and they have done nothing but really like put a lot of love for this kid. Like I can't, let me put it this way. If I'm going to criticize them, I'm going to criticize someone who is living on welfare, getting EBT and has 6 kids and doesn't get a job and is like, you know what, let me, have another kid because I want another kid. Like there's so many different groups where, they bring kids in the world that probably have no business bringing them in. So, and you see even with a lot of areas where there seems like even no hope, for people to get a job or have a success or have a future and try to break out of that. So, to me, it's just, hey, in a lot of cases, it could be a whole bunch of hot mess, so, I can't justify it. I can't criticize it because I know that there is a lot of different people who bring people in the world and you see them and you say to yourself, how could you have a kid when this is going on or you're dealing with this or you got this, it just can't explain it. I can't answer it, but, I always looked at them beyond, that extracurricular activity. But I will say this, that's Matt Riddle's type. You know what I mean? Matt Riddle, that's his type. They get along great. Why do 2 people get together? Sometimes it's just, you can't explain it. I wish I had the perfect answer for it, but for me, I didn't look at her as an adult film star who is dating a wrestler who likes to party and this and that. I think their worlds kind of, and plus I'll say this too, and this is not in defense of them. They've gone through a lot of personal issues in relationships too. So I think it's also a case where you had 2 people who had a lot in common and there were, I don't want to use the D word, but there was a lot of, dare I say depression, or there's a lot of, consoling each other and going through similar experiences. And I think that helped them click together as well.
I think that's a fair statement considering what I know. I give Matt Bird a lot of credit. The fucking guy deserves a medal, at least before he met Misha Montana anyway, right, Jimmy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 2 medals. 2 medals. Hey, Tone, let's
I deserve a medal. I deserve a medal for stupidity.
I'll give you like 5 medals just for enduring the whole thing without killing yourself. How's that sound?
All right.
You know, I'm not defending any of the other women that were involved, but I will say this. You know, when you're in the middle of, you know, something that really emotionally hurts you, sometimes you don't look at things in a clear vision, or sometimes you interpret something a little bit different. So I don't think, I think her name is Danielle, and I don't think they were completely being, you know, inauthentic. I think in some cases, this is what they believed. Look, I remember early on where one woman said something like, you said you were going to do this, and you said you were going to marry me, and you said we were going to have this. And I immediately thought like Howard Beach when I was growing up, like a guy breaks up with a girl. You told me you were going to do this. You told me you're going to put a ring on it. You know what? I changed my mind.
You're a nice guy. Here's the word for it. You ready? Batshit fucking crazy. That's what it is. That's what it is. Believe me, I witnessed it firsthand in a very short time. So it's called batshit crazy.
That's why I live in a boring life doing hotlines, because I don't like controversy. Honestly, the reason why I'm so authentic in what I do is because I'm not a good liar. I'd rather not lie in drama. I mean, I went through a lot of immaturity. I mean, that's why I burned through a bunch of hosts back in the day too, because, you know, I definitely have my issues also. I mean, I'm old enough now to come to terms, you know, that I wasn't the easiest person to deal with, but, you know, I try to stay away from drama. I hate drama. I mean, Don, I don't even like bringing it up on shows. So
why don't you take us back to how you met your partner, Kevin Castle, not your wife, your partner on the show, Kevin Castle. When does it all start with you deciding, you know what, let me go video with everything? I mean, you're doing a hotline obviously first, and how does the show come about in your relationship? How did you meet Kevin?
Well, I was doing my hotline up until 2005. I actually, in 2005, there was both. We were doing podcasts, and I was still doing my daily hotline report. And my hotline, even going back to 1997, people could leave messages. I always love to hear feedback. I'd love to hear people, you know, agreeing, disagreeing, you know, getting different things. Like I said, you know, if I didn't have voicemail on my hotlines, Louis Dangerously from ECW would never reached out to me. Shane Douglas would have never reached out to me for XPW stuff, you know, with bus trips. Even the Hardcore Homecoming pay-per-view that they did, Shane Douglas actually wanted me to do the bus trips for that, but, you know, the guy Mike Johnson and PW Insider screwed me, which is a whole nother story. But the thing is, people would always be able to leave messages. So there was a guy that would always leave messages, and his name was Kevin from Sheepshead Bay. And he would leave comments about what I said, and I would shout people out. I'd be like, on the next show, I'd be like, to Kevin from Sheepshead Bay, he feels that, you know, that Undertaker should do this. And after a while, I found that I'm always shouting him out because his comments I either really agreed with or I really disagreed with. So after a while, I was doing a hotline with Mad Zombie and Brian Damage. It was the Blackheart Sports Entertainment hotline. And Brian Damage broke away. Timmy Arson, God rest his soul, the ECW Zombie, was also a host with us. He couldn't come on all that often. And Mad Zombie had a lot of issues. He was one scary dude. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but he was one scary dude outside of wrestling. I'll tell you everybody a really quick story. You'll appreciate this. Back in the 90s, an adult video came out involving the wife of Tommy Dreamer, Beulah McGillicuddy. And it was from Penthouse Video. If anybody remembers the Silver Bullet, you know, it was legendary in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Mad Zombie, we used to tape trade, and that's how we started doing a hotline together. And he was selling tapes on eBay, plus at ECW events, he would show up with all of these wrestling tapes outside the building and would sell tapes while people were waiting to come in. So he started selling copies of the Beulah porn. That's exactly how you would label it, the Beulah porn. and he was getting 15, 20 bucks a pop. And that video had no audio. The video was grainy. I still have a copy somewhere in my garage. And legend has it that Bully Ray, him and someone else brought Mad Zombie into a bathroom in the Elks Lodge. And Tommy Dreamer came in there as well. And they told him, like, you're not selling that fucking video anymore. He's like, hey, no problem, no problem, no problem. And then he just went back to selling it anyway. But once I got involved with the XPW stuff, I started breaking away from them because Mad Zombie was really, really scary dude. He was a really scary dude. So that's not someone you want to cross. So since I was used to having Mad Zombie and Brian Damage on, I wanted to have someone else instead. And there was this other kid, Joey, that 924 that was in a wheelchair that really was smart about wrestling. I said, yeah, let's just have a show one night. Come on. And we offered it to Kevin also. He came on. And basically, it was Anthony the Funker, Kevin from Sheepshead Bay, Joey from the Bronx, and someone else. And we just chatted about wrestling, and it was a hit. I mean, and it was interesting because we had one Irish Italian, one fully Italian, one Puerto Rican, and one black guy. And then we ended up with another Spanish guy. And then we ended up with a Jewish guy. So we called ourselves.
I was going to say, where's the Jew?
Yeah, okay, we had the Jewish guy too. And we called ourselves the Minority Report. And that's how it took off. So Kev started coming on as a caller in 2004. That's really the first time we started doing together. And then we had a falling out with the two other hosts. And it was just me and Kev. So we were like, what should we call ourselves? So ultimately we called ourselves, this is 2004, 05, because 05 is when I started doing the Don Tony name because of the incident at the USA Pro Wrestling show with the Cannolis. So since I was Don Tony, and he always called himself Kevin Castle because he was in the heavy metal scene, and he used to manage a rock club called Castle Heights on Roosevelt Avenue in Corona, Queens. So he was Kevin Castle. I was Don Tony. So we called it the Don Tony and Kevin Castle Show, and 20 years later, we're still doing it.
And we need a now. Why won't Castle come on video?
He won't.
Well, I'll say this. I'll say this.
Huh?
5 years ago, we really started not enjoying doing the shows. I think it was a reflection of wrestling also. AEW was not around yet. You know, wrestling was really starting to, get bland. And we started falling out of favor with each other. In fact, for a brief time, we even called ourselves the Don, Tony, and Kevin Castle Hour, because we just wanted to do an hour, we didn't want to stop doing it, but we would always just complain about the same things. And if we're going to be a complaining show, then we might as well just quit. So at the time, I was like, all right, what can I do to challenge myself to kind of like make this to the next level again? And I remember about 10, 11 years earlier, we were going to do YouTube. But at that time, we really didn't have the equipment. I didn't know anything about video. So and we didn't want to pay somebody to do video stuff. So we just decided, you know what, let's stick to what has made us successful in what we do. Let's just keep audio. So when I went to go to YouTube about 4 years ago, I had originally asked Kev, I said, hey, you want to do video? And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. And we were going to bring on this other guy, Mish, also, who was going to help us behind the scenes because he was a very smart guy doing, he knows his shit. And for about 9 months, we were gradually preparing to do video. So, and I'm not trying to make an excuse for Kev. Kev still uses a landline phone. He still uses very primitive stuff. He's not a tech guy.
Jimmy, that sounds like you, buddy.
Yeah, so the idea of him, like, I was going to send him a webcam, and I was going to send him this, and we would, and this is a true fact. This guy Mish actually had even sent him a video on YouTube, step by step, how to do this, do this, do this, and he got very frustrated with it because he felt like how I felt 10 years earlier, that it was just very overwhelming. So I had said to him early on, I'm like, look, we don't have to all do video. We're not doing it to show our faces. We don't have the faces for TV. I mean, I don't think anybody looks and gets aroused at us. So I was like, and I was the one that wanted to go video. I just wanted to maybe do something a little bit challenging to just maybe get that love back, to really want to bang it out every day. And then once I commit, there's no turning back. That's why I'm still doing it, I guess, now on a regular basis, because if I even miss one show, I feel like I'm letting down. Even if it's 1,000 people, I'm letting people down. That's why it is almost never that I miss a week. But I'm the one that pushed the YouTube. He didn't really want to do it. And I had told him, don't worry about it. I did not realize once we launched on YouTube, I did not realize the overwhelming number of people that were like, why are you on video? Why is he not on video? Why aren't you on video? What are you, ugly? What are you, fat? What are you this? And I know what Kev looks like. I have pictures of Kev even now. He's not a bad looking dude. It's just, it's very, very overwhelming. Plus, here's another thing too. He lives in an apartment and their, internet is not the greatest. And, you really need to have, some good DSL. We don't break the bank in what we do here. So there's a lot of things that he would need to do. It's not just simply plugging in a webcam. No joke, for real. I have laying around like webcams and extra things that I could just give away to people. I have a Logitech staring right at me right now. I keep as an emergency backup that I never use. He just never felt comfortable about it, and I don't want to push the issue. So once we went live, then I realized that it was just making it worse, because I didn't want it to be pressure and I didn't want it to be overwhelming. And it's exactly what it did. And it just made things less fun. And unfortunately, we had a falling out. And the funny thing is, the falling out we had, Kev doesn't even know this, but it was a total misunderstanding. But I was so mad, and I was like, I'm not even going to fucking tell him. There was one episode that he couldn't show, that he didn't feel well. So what I did was, on the thumbnail on YouTube, I had a logo with the Don, Tony, and Kevin Cash show, and I put a red X over it that, we're not doing the show tonight. It's just me. And he interpreted that, like I'm canceling him out. And I totally don't blame him. It definitely did not come across the way I had planned it to be. I just thought, hey, there's no DTKC episode tonight. It's just me because, he's not feeling well. I just put an X over it and it just blew up. And, because we're 50 some odd year old Italians from New York, similar neighborhoods, we're thick-headed. And, he doesn't want to give in and I don't want to give in. And, it just kind of built for a couple of years, and there was no talking whatsoever. But I will say this, after a while, we started talking again. And Mike, you pushed us to get together again. And, one thing that we always said, that we're not going to do shows just to do shows. We're going to do shows because we like to talk to each other, because we still love wrestling. We still love laughing with each other, not at each other. And I think we started laughing at each other, and we both agreed that, all right, if we do shows again, it's for the right reasons, not because everybody wants it. And January 29th of this year, we just said, you know what, let's bring it back. And there's still a lot of damage that is being repaired, because there's a lot of people that put a lot of time, money, and energy in what we do. And they felt that, hurt. They took it personal. I mean, I can't believe even on Google now, when I type in Don, Tony, and Kevin Castle to see, like, if anybody's talking about us or if there's a buzz, the first result that comes up is Don, Tony, Kevin Castle split. And I'm like, wow, I can't believe. I mean, a lot of people who are newer don't realize that we blew away Cornette's numbers back in the day. And nothing against Jim Cornette or Brian Last. They were probably one of the few that I really, really enjoy now, even though I don't agree with everything that they say. But, we used to be the #1 show across the net. And I look back on it, I'm like, man, why was I such an immature asshole? Like, if I didn't do but I had to learn the right way, not fix a problem because I know it needs to be fixed. I have to fix a problem because I want the problem to be fixed.
Tony, we all have roads we have to go down in order to get where we're going. In case anyone doesn't know, we're talking to Don Tony, who's one half of the great Don Tony and Kevin Castle show. First off, you've got to recognize, I think that you sit back a little bit and you take this very, I don't want to say passive aggressive, it's not the right word, but you guys got to give yourself props for what you've done for the industry, because you have done a lot for the industry. There's all different ways to affect an industry, and you have done that, both of you guys, and it's not over yet. I really feel like your show is one of the great shows that has this opportunity to really reach some heights, and that's why I'm glad you guys got back together. Again, I look at my partner, Jimmy. I think Jimmy is an ultimate talent, and I think this show also has those kind of legs.
Absolutely.
But that all being said, again, you should be very proud. I keep saying it, what you've done, what your partner has done, and I'm glad you guys have gotten back together. And you know what? I tell Jimmy all the time, you take all these different roads, you get to where you're going eventually, either good or bad, right? You should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. In the end result, you guys will be successful. Question.
I want to just say one thing to you also, and this is deep for me. I get it. We were not in the business. Over the years, we've made friends with people in the business, people that are on TV today. I have some decent memories. I'm very proud of some of the things, some of the causes, some of the relationships I built, some of the people I've helped. The reason why coming on here means more than you will really ever understand is because Kevin and I have been doing this pretty much for 20 some odd years. I've been doing it since 97. And I feel in 2024, and it's just a reflection of society across everything, I just feel not that I'm not appreciated, but you're the only guys that reached out that said, hey, you want to come on? I've had people who have 10 times the viewers that I do that said to me, hey, DT, when AEW comes to Forest Hills, come on, let's all get together. Yeah, I'm down. And then they come to Forest Hills and they're inviting everybody to all these parties. And I never got one email or a DM. And it's like, wow, either we're really good and people are just jealous, or because we're so older now, like we don't get any respect at all. Like you said about the Dave LaGreca's and everyone else. I know, and no one will ever admit it, but I know there's a lot of shows out there that copy our style, what we do, this and that, and will not name drop us once as if we never existed. So when I get something like this, it's like, man, that's pretty fucking cool.
Because, Jimmy, and you need to speak to this because you'd be perfect to say it. First of all, Dave LaGreca's smart. I would shit all over you too. I wouldn't give you a pop because you let you in the door, he's in trouble. These are facts. I'm not an anti-LaGreca guy, but I do know talent, and I know what you and your partner have, right? And it is talent. So I get it. Don't prop you up. But I think you will bust through the door. But, Jimmy, you've spoken about this a million times. Please, go ahead, say it.
Well, it's ironic to me. Well, you know what? Don's already busted through the door. Like he said all those years ago, he had numbers that would make some of these guys that are considered big time now blush. So keeping that in mind, the thing I can't shake about New York, and I don't know how Don feels about it, what really, really gets under my personal skin is that the guys from New York that have radio shows are the ones that will help you the least. So I find it very interesting that the closer you get to your own backyard with those in the business, the more they pretend you don't exist, but they're clearly lifting from you. Any thoughts on the New York scene in general? Because that shit pisses me off.
I will say this. I know there's a lot of people that work very hard at what they do, and I will always commend hard work. If somebody works really hard to get what they're getting, I commend them for it. There are people who claim to be our friends that we know, at the end of the day, it's cutthroat. And I know for a fact we make points about wrestling. And, instead of just saying, hey, I heard the DT and KC said this is this, you know what? I disagree with this. Instead, it'll be indirect cheap shots, not mention our names, like throwing it out there to make us look stupid. And people aren't stupid. They can figure it out. I realize that you want respect, you give respect. And I live by now, like I treat people like I want to be treated. That wasn't always the case. 10 years ago, I probably was them in a lot of ways. I mean, I'll say this straight up. We were talking the other day about Andrew Zarian. We were talking about Fightful. We were talking about this. I've had people over the last couple of years that I'll give him credit for something. And I brought up Andrew Zarian because he's the first one that came to mind. I gave him credit for something. And he sent me a DM. He's like, oh, now you're cool with me? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you used to rip me apart. You used to say a lot of shit about me. I'm like, really? What? And I'm like, and then I go back and listen. I'm like, holy shit. That's why I was joking with Mike. Even the teaser for today, I said, some people think there's going to be a hit job tonight because people have said to me in the past, like, you used to say shit about them also. I'm like, I don't remember this. I think back in the day, I think I got a little too cocky for the success, and we used to just rip people just to rip them. So, I kind of am guilty of being a dick back in the day also. So the people of today, I say to myself, to answer your question, I know who's doing it, but I also know sooner or later it's going to catch up to them because they're not as smart as they think they are. And I'm not saying that we're smarter than them, but they're not as smart as they think they are. And when shit blows up in their face, it blows up bad. And, they let them enjoy their fun for the next year, 3 years, 5 years. But when it doesn't go well, that's when you hear, oh, I can't do a show this week. I got to do this. Oh, I can't do, I had technical difficulties. People will start seeing a pattern that, they make excuses for not doing shows because they're losing, their core audience. One thing about us, and this is why I don't get upset anymore, because I know that who tunes into us is our core more than anything else. We have a Patreon that is maybe 1/5, 1/6 the size it used to be. But I can honestly say 80% of the people on the Patreon have been there since day one, 7 years ago.
Right.
So we have that core loyal group, and that's who I care about.
Also, think about the most important part of this, and I'm serious about this. Think about how many people's lives you have changed. Let it be one. And I've said this to Jimmy. We've had people reach out and said, thank you. You saved my life, whatever. That's probably the most important part, and I'm sure you guys have done that for many. Listen, we're almost out of time. I got one last question for you. Hard one again. You guys are somewhat close to Karrion Kross. I think it's common knowledge that Karrion Kross, it's just not happening. No matter what he does, what he tries. At what point in your show are you going to – look, I know you have a relationship with the guy, but at what point in the show are you going to blame Karrion Kross for Karrion Kross?
Well, I'll say this. I will take full responsibility of trying to somehow convince people that the helmet is not as bad. Farouk wore one, other people wore one, and I think, and I'm not just saying this because, look, I don't break bread with him. I'm not obligated to say anything good or bad. In fact, you want to know something straight up? one of the reasons why he became a fan of what we do before he even got into wrestling was because if we don't like something, we will tell you. You know, it's nothing personal. We don't want to see anybody get hurt by it. But I think I'll give you a good. I'll answer it like this. It'll be quick. When Karrion Kross, I'm trying to remember if it was Lucha Underground. I don't remember if it was Lucha Underground, but right before he went to WWE, I remember people were saying, "Oh, they got to put him to the main roster. Fuck NXT. He's got to do this. Oh, I can see you did." And he was like, "What? I haven't even gone there yet, and you're already saying I should do this, this, and that." Like, he doesn't want people to put him on a pedestal. But I'll say this: I think of Dijak being released today, and Kevin and I had just had this conversation on Monday that there are some big men that WWE just does not know what to do with. And sometimes their creativeness, they can't get it over in a 120-page book. They need 500 pages. You know what I mean? So I think the problem with Karrion Kross is Scarlett, they put him with Paul Ellering. And I love Paul Ellering. I love what he did with the Legion of Doom. To me, he looks like a bonsai plant right now. Like a really old, small, cool-looking plant. But if you ever bought a bonsai plant, after a while, you look at it and you're like, why do I have this? It doesn't bear fruit. It doesn't. They put him with him. They put him with AOP, and with all due respect, AOP has been a disaster. They had matches with the Street Profits that they got knocked out of the ring, and they were just dead for 10 minutes. And we were laughing like, what? These are 360-pound guys, and they're laid out like they're dead. And I'm saying to myself, why are these people together? So I'm not trying to dodge with Karrion Kross. All I'm saying is that I think that they have yet to allow him to be on the main roster as just him and Scarlett being that natural born killers type duo, a little bit, very, very intelligent, but also very maniacal. And I was thinking if they go to Netflix and they could have a little bit more freedom, that the character may come off a little bit more. The problem is, and I'm saying this is criticism, when you got the Bloodline storyline kicking ass, when you have other storylines that are blowing it out of the water, when it comes to Karrion Kross talking about Xavier Woods, talking about, Sheamus, talking about the Street Profits, who cares?
Right.
So,
who cares?
I think the problem is
presentation sucks.
Yeah. I think the only way Kross is saved is they got to get him away from the AOP. They got to get him away from Paul Ellering and let him
shave his head.
Yeah, he could shave his head, and also
and Scarlett's hair's got to be blonde.
Blonde.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they did that because of Tiffany Stratton is the blonde.
Right, that's true.
But I want to see him fuck with heels. I think you allow him to deck Grayson Waller and Austin Theory, might get a nice little pop. WrestleMania 40, they did the street fight. A lot of people loved it. I hated it because I know what a Philly street fight is, and that wasn't it. They beat the shit out of each other. And, people like, well, they were chanting ECW. Yeah, if I went out there and chair bashed somebody or hit them with a cane, they'll chant ECW. Part of my language, I did indie work in Long Island and got holy shit chants. Because I didn't know how to run properly. I ran through a barricade, the guardrails, and I dislocated my shoulder, for real. And I'm in the ring like this. And people are going, holy shit. And I'm like, wow, this is good, but it hurts too much. I think Kross, the problem is what he has in his mind is not the WWE template. And you try to play him off as a baby face, sort of, or you have to make a decision.
He feels done. He feels done. The character feels cooked.
He's cooked. Cooked really is the right word. Jimmy, I want Don to hear this question. It's from Ronnie C. saying, fellow New Yorker, I've listened to DT for over 20 years, even won ECW ticks from DT. I'd love to know, this is a question to you, Jimmy, if you feel, he's followed wrestling hotlines, do you feel DT's hotline would be successful in 2024?
That's really a great question. It's hard to say. I mean, after all, everything's at the tip of our, holding a phone nowadays. Maybe. It all depends on how it's marketed, right, Don?
Yeah, I don't think it would work as far as dialing a phone number anymore because 2 clicks, you're on YouTube. One click, you're on Apple. You're on Spotify.
You mean to say I have to stand there and hold the phone against my ear and listen to you?
And press buttons because we used to have 4 options. I don't think it would work
for $9.99. No thanks. I'm passing on that. Yeah. Listen, I'm out of time. Don Tony, first of all, thank you for taking your time out of a very hard schedule. I know how hard you work in your real life, and I only wish the success for you and your partner. You guys have been successful, but I won't be happy until Kevin Castle and Don Tony make it to Sirius XM, along with Monte The Pharaoh, of course. Jimmy, we will not be on July 4th. We return back the week Thursday after, where we have B. Brian Blair in studio. And I'm still working on a special Von Erich to come in, and then Diamond Dallas Page, right? So it's been some really great shows, Jimmy. I thank you again. Don Tony, thank you for taking your time out.
Thank you for having me. I was very much appreciated.
And we'll see you guys. By the way, everybody, happy 4th of July, and everybody for taking.
Thank you.
Rumor has it in the debate today that Biden fell asleep at the stand. So we don't know what's going on right now. Jimmy, you want to send us out?
You've been watching Monte and the Pharaoh with the great Don Tony. And until after the 4th of July, happy 4th of July. Later.